Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders, where we bring in experts from their respective fields and they share with us from their experience best practices from the past, present, and future. Today, we are guested by John Barrows, who is an expert in sales. Thank you so much for joining us, John.
Well, hey, Chris, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, man. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you got going on, what you're working on.
Yeah, so these days I'm still out there selling just like everybody else. It's a weird environment right now, and so I do sales training. I mean, ultimately that's what I end up doing to pay the bills. But right now, because of the seismic, especially in the SaaS and the tech industry, because of the seismic shift that happened in early 2023. I think we're all living in a legacy model right now. So whatever was relevant 2, 3, 4 years ago in the golden age of sales, these days it's probably not working too well. So I'm out there selling just like everybody else, trying to figure out what's going on and translate that to people who are willing to put in the work and want to get better.
Absolutely. Awesome. Let's dive right into it. You have a plethora of experience, starting off in more of like enterprise and corporate sales, and before you transition into more of like this advisory sales coaching capacity. So, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in sales. I think sales and marketing, a lot of times people just kind of like stumble into it somehow.
Yep.
Very rarely, but I have heard from a few instances where it's like it was ingrained in their DNA from very young age. But let us know your story.
Yeah, no, I was kind of the former, not the latter. I fell into it just like everybody else. I grew up here in Boston, went down to University of Maryland to get my degree in marketing because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And then when I got out in the real world, it was just, the marketing jobs just didn't really resonate with me. I've always been one that I know I'm not the smartest kid out there, right? But I know I got a strong work ethic, and it always bothered me that salaried positions never made sense to me, because I knew I was going to work harder than most people. And I feel like if I work harder, I should get paid more. And so, I fell into sales. I was fortunate in my transition because Black and Decker is right next to Maryland, and Black and Decker owns DeWalt Power Tools. And so they recruit heavily out of the University of Maryland. And they had this program DeWalt did called the Swarm Team, and it was basically, it was under the umbrella of sales, but it wasn't. It was more event marketing. So my job was to drive around and give away free tools to construction workers all over the East Coast here. So it wasn't sales. I didn't have a quota. It was literally just evangelizing things. So I really excelled at that in the first 6, 8 months. And then they promoted me to the Home Depot team, which that's with a little bit more sales because Home Depot obviously had to buy DeWalt power tools. But my job was to take that $10,000 order and turn it into a $50,000 order, right? Through cross sells and caps and all that stuff, and developing relationships with the store managers and those type of things. And then after about a year and a half of that, I ended up joining. They wanted me to move all over the world, and I just didn't really want to do that. And so I joined Xerox. And that's really where I got my true sales education. Xerox was at the time world renowned for their training and everything else.
Yep.
And I mean, talk about selling a commodity, right? Like selling copiers. And not only did I sell copiers, I sold copiers to the government. So it wasn't even like I couldn't even negotiate on contract. My price was my price, right? So that's where I learned relationship development. That's where I learned how to take rejection. And also I learned kind of design thinking of how to, instead of just pure top down selling, really understanding the business and coming up with a perspective to I can, address that to the executive before I earn the right to get up there. And then from there, I started a company with a few friends of mine doing outsourced IT services. So that's where I got into startups, right? Because I was an East Coast kid, and back then, entrepreneurship was for those West Coast weirdos, at the time. And but I had a good friend who started a business, and I'm not the ultimate risk taker. I'm a calculated risk taker, right? So I'm not the guy who's going to live on mom's couch and eat ramen noodles to try to get by type of thing. But as long as there's a little bit of a foundation there, I'm the second guy in that you want, right? Because I'll put that thing on fire. And that's what we did. But I was 23, so I had no idea what I was doing. So I took every training I could. I took Sandler, Miller, Hyman, Taz, all of it. And there was this company called Basho that I fell in love with because the training was super tactical. You talk about, some of us have it in their DNA. the owner and founder of Basho, Jeff Hoffman, who's my mentor to this day, he's one of those guys. Like
Mm.
he is, when I say natural born sales, I only think there's probably about 5% of our population that are actual natural born sales reps. And I mean that in all the right ways,
Yeah.
not all the slimy, sleazy ways, but just know how to engage with people, know what to ask when, and like that type of thing. And I saw him and I was like, holy shit, like that's how it's done. And so I used the Basho training to grow us. We ended up being the fastest growing company in Massachusetts for a few years in a row, sold us off to Staples. I thought I was a good fit for Staples. Come to find out, apparently I'm not a corporate guy. I don't have much of a filter and I really don't like playing politics. So after a little while, Staples, offered me another position. They fired me. And I was looking for a job and Basho said, John, you want to be a trainer? And I was like, nope, absolutely not. They're like, why not? I'm like, I don't like trainers because most trainers, other than Jeff, most trainers that I had come across at that point in my life, sales trainers, were either failed sales professionals or professional presenters. And if you've ever been through a training where you could just tell the trainer's never actually done what they're telling you what to do, I didn't want to be that guy. So they said, don't worry, you have to actually use these techniques to sell so you can train so you can get paid. And I was like, all right, the whole practice what you preach thing, right? So I joined Basho, took on some bigger ones, brought on some bigger ones, accounts. And then to make a very long story short, they screwed it up and I took it over. So I went off on my own about 10 years ago, give or take. And I work with, companies like Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Dropbox, Google, Amazon, and I train all their sales organizations on the stuff that I learned, but also that I'm learning every day.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, this is an interesting segue. So walk us through from Basho to then kind of, you say they screwed it up. You ended up starting off on your own.
Yep.
What did that entail? What did that mean? What was, I guess, like if you can get a little bit more granular around the
Yeah.
steps that were there.
Yeah, that was it was interesting because Basho, it was around 2000, we were doing okay, as a business. But then 2007 hit and our CEO, Jeff, he actually stepped aside and he brought in a new guy to because they were investing in software too. So they were like way ahead of their time. They were investing in tools like basically building what is now considered a sales loft or an outreach or an engaging type of tool, plus some more stuff. So they got a bunch of funding from Jeff's, colleagues that he used to work with at Akamai. And one of them was this guy, Earl. And so Jeff moved aside to try to kind of get the company to the next level because we were turning into a software company. And this guy, Earl, came in. And Earl was a very different character than Jeff, let's put it that way. And I mean, one thing leads to another, and the economy tanks. And Earl has no patience for what's going on with he was a software guy. He was not a professional services guy. So I'm not kidding. One day he walked in, it was about 20 of us, and he's like, all right, that's it. Party's over. And we're all kind of like, huh? We're like, ah, shit. All right. We knew that things weren't going well. So what's a transition here? Like a month or two, wind down, that type of thing. And he's like, I don't think you heard me. Here's a check. Here's a box. Pack your shit and get out. And we were like, right now? He's like, get out, like yelled at us, right? So I grabbed the check and I ran to the bank and I cashed it because I wanted to be the first one just in case there wasn't any money there. Then when I came back, and this goes back to, I think for me, one of my skills, I guess, if you call it that, is I usually can look at a situation and with very limited data points, make a pretty good judgment call on what I should do. Like I don't overanalyze anything. And yes, it's bit me in the ass before. But in this case, I looked at it and I knew he wasn't tanking the company. He just wanted the software. So he couldn't care less about the training and the professional services. So I was like, wait a minute, this guy just walked away from what was like a $3 to $4 million business with a product that everybody loves and a client list that was off the charts. Oh, and by the way, a revenue stream that was already there. Because the way that our contracts worked back then, like we had Gartner, Forrester, like huge companies who would give like paid $3, $4, $500,000 for training, and it was a 50% deposit and 50% receivable. So he had already collected these 50% deposits from everybody. And I knew he wasn't going to give them their money back.
Mm-hmm.
And he had just fired all the trainers. So, right. So I was like, hey, I walked into his office. I was like, hey, that sucks. Thanks. But just out of curiosity, like, what are you going to do with the training? And he's like, I don't know. What do you think I should do with it? And I was like, what? Like, you haven't thought this through? And like on this, I was like, okay, well, what if I were to take over the training? Like, what if I were to create a separate company? I'll go deliver on all that training. You keep the deposits, I'll keep the receivables, and then afterwards, I'll pay you a affiliate fee or whatever it is to resell the IP. And he was like, done, make it happen. So I was like, holy crap. And so while everybody else was kind of like, oh my God, I lost my job. What do I do? I don't have healthcare. I saw that opportunity and I ran with it. So I was like, I did the Jerry Maguire thing. I'm like, guys, who's coming with me? You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, and it only ended up being me and two of the other trainers. Now, learning lesson from that, I still going back to I'm not a risk taker, but I mean, nobody gets to start a business with a proven revenue, a proven product, a client list everybody loves, and a revenue stream, right? But I was still chicken to go off on my own because I was again, so I went into business with these other two guys. Now, we didn't decide to go into business together. We were just the three last men standing. That was it. And if there's anything I've learned about starting businesses, it's you never want to start a business with somebody who can do exactly what you can do.
Mhm.
Because inevitably you're going to look at each other like I'm better than you, especially in sales. You know what I mean? I mean, it's pretty objective. Like you sell more than me, you're better than me type of thing. And that just nothing but conflict. So you want to start with people who complement you. Like I should have started with a finance person and a operations person, and I'd be the sales. But we were three sales guys, not even just three sales guys, three trainers. And we just grabbed our clients and ran. And one of the guys was kind of shady. So we ended up firing him almost immediately. And then it was me and this other guy. And we were kind of running our own lanes. And eventually we just did not click. You know what I mean? After about 3.5 years, we kind of looked at each other and said, you know what, let's go our separate ways here. So I split off and then did a direct line because Jeff Hoffman had come back in and got his IP. So I went straight to Jeff and said, Jeff, can I develop a relationship with you specifically, just me, and do this? And he said, yep, absolutely. So I did that and I was off and running. And so that's where, and again, I had my revenue streams, I had my clients, and I knew that that I had a pretty strong runway in front of me.
Yeah,
So that's when I finally was kind of pulled the cord and went off on my own.
got it. And how long ago was that?
That was probably about 2000. Let's see, 2008 is give or take is when everything fell apart. 3 years after that was the contract was up with Jeff. So 2012, give or take, is when I went off on my own.
Okay. So a little still over like 10 years now you've been on your own.
Mhm.
Yeah, pros and cons of it?
Well, so yeah, and again, learning lessons here. I built a business. Things are going so well in the SaaS and the tech space. I rode that wave just like everybody else, man. You know what I mean? And I'm not a business genius here, but I think I can usually kind of, catch the wind of what's going on. And for some reason, I ignored the interest rate factor, just like everybody else did.
Mm,
And when interest rates went through the roof and money wasn't free anymore and everything fell apart. So I had built this business up to about 20 employees, right? We had multi-million dollars, right? That type of thing. And then it all came crashing down at the end of at the beginning of 2023. And
mm,
I had to restructure everything. So I had to cut the business in half and I split it up. I gave the other part of the business to my business partner. And I went back off on my own effectively. And, pros and cons, I realized that, I built a business because I could, not because I wanted to.
mhm,
Um, also, I also realized I think I'm a pretty good leader. I'm an all right coach. I'm a terrible manager. Like I just don't like the details. I don't like holding people accountable. My philosophy is I hire really good people and pay them really well and give them as many resources as I can and access to me whenever they want. And I let them go do their thing. You know what I mean? And that works in a growth economy when things are going well, but when things are really tight and you have to pay attention to the details, I wasn't paying enough attention to the details. And so, I'm not saying I could have saved us based on what happened because it came to such a screeching halt. Let's put it this way. Every single one of my clients had money with SVB.
mm,
You know what I mean? 95% of my clients were in SaaS. I mean, when I tell you it stopped on a dime, it was worse than COVID ever was. COVID was a 2-month blip that was
mhm,
like, oh my God, chaos, what's going on? But then the SaaS industry exploded after 2 months. And
yeah,
I mean, rightfully so, right? So that wasn't, and I was a lot leaner back then too. I only had about 10 employees. I didn't have 20 and I wasn't carrying the burn that I had and everything else. So, I think if you want to build a business, you should want to build a business. Um, don't get me wrong. I think I'm an evolutionist. Like I just kind of keep evolving. I'm not necessarily like a hardcore goal setter. It's like, let me put that stake in the ground and go for it. I'm more, it's like, all right, let's just keep moving forward here. You know what I mean? And so I ebb and flow, but I do realize, I think you do have to understand your strengths. Like there's a reason I don't fit in corporate.
Hmm.
I don't have a filter. I don't like playing politics, that type of thing. Like structure bothers me. Like I like building structure. I hate being in structure. And so, I think you got to ask yourself, like, what gets you up in the morning? You know what I mean? What fires you up? And managing people for me does not fire me up. It just doesn't. And there are other people that do, you know what I mean? And you can't hire people to do that. But I don't know. I just didn't I wasn't able to put the structure together well enough for me not to be an issue as it related to the growth of the business.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, kudos to you in terms of like the level of self-awareness because you're not forcing the issue.
Yeah.
But obviously, I'm sure you also went through the learning experience of it all. Um, my next kind of switching gears here would be just kind of you talked about your history, how to generate relationships, how to sell a commodity, right? Which I think obviously in the if you were in the SaaS sales space, like it was totally different.
Everything's.
But yeah, I would say a lot of the things that you mentioned, I feel like we're going back full circle to some of those tactics, right? Like it is about building relationships. I think it's about now like it's about storytelling, problem solving at its core, and
Mhm.
not there's no more of like this abundance flow of money going around to spend on things that are nice to haves.
Mhm.
Everything has to have a definitive ROI. A lot of
Mhm.
the time, CFOs are now are involved in the decision making process, even on small deals that have like less than five-figure ACVs kind of thing.
Yep.
So I'm curious as to like, you mentioned things shifted early 2023.
Mhm.
Walk us through what you saw from your perspective, and then carry us through, maybe into like maybe you can highlight a few chapters that's happened between that point and then leading into this year and where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, look, when I do my keynotes and stuff these days, I'm positioning 2010 to 2022 as the golden age of sales.
Yeah,
Like if you got into tech sales after 2010, I'm sorry, hadn't been that hard. You know what I mean? Like we've over-engineered the sales process and
yeah,
and it's our fault, right, for doing it. It's not these kids' fault. But I mean, we were able to get away with blasting out template emails to anybody, right? Setting up disco calls with anybody with a pulse, droning through Bant questions in our demos, letting our SE do the majority of the work, quite frankly, and then offering a massive discount. Like that was sales for the past 12 years, right? And so what happened, and then you add COVID to the mix, right? Because now, look, when I graduated and got into sales, I didn't get a lot of good sales training, but
yeah,
I was around sales, like physically around sales. I was in the bullpen, I was listening so I was learning through osmosis. You know what I mean? And so I was able to pick up on a lot of stuff. And I went to networking events and I had face-to-face meetings with people. So I could read body language. I could feel body language. I could feel like if you and I were sitting in a cafe right now or in an office right now and I said something stupid, like I could see you shift in your seat and realize, ooh, that I probably shouldn't have said that, right? Whereas right now, I just see your head. Like you could be
yeah,
doing whatever you want under this screen, and I have no idea how uncomfortable or engaged you are.
yeah,
And so not only did we over-engineer the sales process, but then everything went remote.
yeah.
And so we skipped all the fundamentals. And these kids didn't even learn how to do it through osmosis. They just
Hmm.
did it. You know what I mean? It's like follow the process, follow the process. Here's the pitch, here's the presentation. And so now when things fall apart and ROI matters, money isn't free, relationships mean something, like we have a whole generation of sales professionals that don't know what to do. And they're,
Hmm.
oh, and then you add AI to this.
Yep.
And we are, I think, at an existential crisis here from a sales standpoint. I fundamentally believe that, for instance, the SDR role, the SDR BDR role, I, I don't see it being a viable role here in the next 2 years. I just don't. Because I'm already seeing stuff that I'm using like Clay and all these other tools to automate like super hyper personalized stuff, right? And at the end of the day, do I care that an email that I get is from a robot or a human? No, I just care that it's relevant and it's something I need. So, no, do I want to talk to a human? Probably, eventually, who knows? But I think you add this into the mix and you realize how in trouble the profession of sales is. I mean, quick little simple example that I tell everybody to do right now is go on to ChatGPT or Perplexity, whatever, act as a potential client for your service, right? So what I would do is I would go to Perplexity and I would say, "Hey, I'm a 50-person sales org. I'm this VP of sales is a 50-person sales organization. This is what we sell. This is how we sell. I have some issues in this, and I'm looking at the JB sales training. Tell me what I need to know about JB sales. How does JB sales compare to the other three vendors? Like, what are the other top competitors of JB sales and why?" And you'll realize that within a 10-minute conversation with a ChatGPT or a Perplexity, you will get more value out of that than you will some kid who's going to drone through BANT questions in their presentation for you. You
Yep.
understand how in trouble we are. Look, we're not going to get replaced. People say sales is going to get replaced by AI. That is not true. Sales reps are going to get replaced by other sales reps who learn how to use AI. That's
Mhm.
what's going to happen. And unfortunately, I think that's Pareto's rule right there. That's a 80-20 factor
Yep.
because there's a vast majority of people that are just going through the motions. And those people are going to get replaced, period.
Yeah. I mean, I agree 1000%. In terms of, I think like from a go-to-market and sales, motion, you mentioned, things like Clay and automation and AI and stuff and how it's going to be more intelligent, more personalized. Um, do you feel like those, I mean, I have my own personal beliefs, but like, I think
Mhm.
like when you think about channels like email and LinkedIn and stuff, I think we saw that blow up in last year. I think partially because there were so many tools out there
Mhm.
clamoring for the same attention.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if they're a direct competitor or not a direct competitor. Like the persona you're going after is dealing with 10, 15, 20 other categories and all the
Yep.
players within those categories vying for their attention.
Oh yeah.
Uh, how do you, and to me, attention is like a very super valuable commodity. How
Always.
do you feel like this shift in all this has affected how we go about, from a sales perspective, capturing that attention as it relates to sales?
Yeah. Yeah, I think look, it doesn't somebody said this a while back, which I totally agree with, which it doesn't matter what you sell, it matters how you sell,
Yeah,
right? Everything's commoditized. I don't care what you sell.
yeah,
Everything's commoditized. So it's how you sell. And how you sell makes a difference, right? And I think it's no longer I'm trying to sell you my product. Ultimately, look, sales isn't about convincing anybody of anything. It's about helping people solve problems or achieve goals, period.
yep,
So if you become a problem solver, and guess
yep.
what? That might not have to have anything to do with your solution, right? And so I think that's the focal point, right? Is to get our head out of our ass and stop thinking about just get, the commission check and what I have to do, but actually helping the client, heaven forbid, solve some problems. But in order to get to that point, I think all of us in sales need to become mini marketers.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to be because so that's why your brand matters, right? That's why what you post on social matters. That's why, here's an example, like cold calling. Anybody could make the argument right now that cold calling is absolutely 100% pointless. You know what I mean? The connect rates are miserable. Like rarely do people pick up the phones or any of that stuff, right? And that is true if you look at it from a direct selling standpoint. Like if you think these days you're going to make a cold call, somebody's going to pick up and you're going to be able to convince them that of something they've never heard of before that isn't on their priority list and have them be like, "Oh yeah. Actually, you know what? That whole strategy we put together and all those other priorities that are on my plate right now, whoo, this cold call, man, opened up my eyes to a lot of stuff. Let's engage in a sales process." Like those are so few and far between at this point. But so it's I think it's pointless to look at it that way. But if you look at it as a marketing function almost, where that cold call that maybe you left that voicemail message to gets them to read it on their phone and maybe it lets them to go look at the email that you might have sent or go to your website to see what's this all about. And then they come inbound. Now all of a sudden you can start to justify it. Right. So that's why we have to be good at everything at this point. And we're going back to full cycle sales. So let's stop with this predictable revenue shit that was great for us as organizations to help scale, but it was a miserable customer experience and always has been. Like, and let's get back to like account-based marketing with real tailored messaging using AI that feeds true intent data to a full cycle sales rep that calls with purpose and relevance,
Mm.
right? And then takes the full cycle sales from there. And it ultimately ends up being, quick analogy I had back in 2017. I had seen this emails, there's this one email that I, training, Jeff Hoffman's the guy who came up with it. It's called the Why You Now email. Now everybody, not everybody, everybody should do it. It's about personalization, right? It's find a
Yep.
trigger, write an email, personalized, what's up, let's talk. And in 2017, a couple of reps left Salesforce and they actually created an AI bot that wrote my email better than I could have written.
Mm.
And I quite frankly, this was back in 2017, way before ChatGPT. And I had a heart attack. I was like, holy shit, what the And so I met with Gary Vaynerchuk, and he has this 4D session where you can go to his office in New York and you sit down with all of his executives, talk about what's going on. And then he comes in at the end and does a Q&A with you. It's like only 10, 15 people. And I said, Gary, I just saw a robot write an email better and faster than I ever could. Where does that leave us as humans? And he said something that still sticks with me to this day. He goes, John, don't worry about the tech. You're not going to beat it, man. He goes, but be the last mile. He's like, let the tech do all the heavy lifting, right? Let it do the research. Let it even write the email if you want.
Yeah.
But right before you hit send, just make sure you humanize it a little bit, right? Because until computers start buying things, like
Yeah.
once computers start buying stuff, then we're all in deep shit, right? But as long as there's a human on the other end of that call, or the other end of that email, or the other end of that Zoom thing, like there needs to be that human factor. But all that other stuff can be handled through technology. And so
Mm.
I think being the last mile, becoming a mini marketer, right, and making sure that your brand, all that other stuff, is really the only way you can get attention these days. And, we all heard the stat that there's only about 5% of anybody's addressable market that's actually in market for their services, right?
Yeah.
So that means, and if they are in market, most likely that's an inbound. So our job is that other 95% somehow get super tight on our ideal customer profile. And with every single interaction that we have with them, we maximize the value and the impression that leaves.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the only chance that we got.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's well said. When you talk about value and the impression, and becoming mini marketers, what does that mean from, like, say, an actionable, tangible step for some of these sales people out there, right? I think, like, should they be posting 3 times a day? Should they be posting their strategies? Should they be posting about their personalities? Like, what are some of these things to really highlight, something that could be a takeaway for them?
Yeah, so I'll give you a super tactical thing. This is my approach. So say you sell to, I'm gonna pick the harder stuff, right? Because look, I sell sales training to sales reps. Like I sell crack to crackheads, and I'm a
Yeah.
crackhead, so it's pretty easy for me to sell sales. And I build my brand. Like that's why I love influencers who are like, oh, just do this. It's like, dude, like you're influencing salespeople. Like that's fucking easy to sell that. I don't say easy, but if you're a 22-year-old kid trying to sell, like, I don't know, cybersecurity to a CISO, like how in the yeah, build your brand, right? Go for it, right? That's stupid for somebody to say. So here's how you can go on that journey though. Business acumen is, I think, sorely lacking in sales.
Mm.
Nobody can have a business conversation anymore. Every rep I get on the phone goes through the route conversation with their route questions and digs for pain and all that wonderful stuff. As a CEO of my own organization, I don't want to have that conversation. I don't. I know what my problems are. I don't need you to ask me a bunch of questions so you can understand what my problems are. I need to be, I need to think about shit. I need you to bring stuff to me that I haven't heard of before or gets me to think. And so how do you do that as a 22, 23-year-old kid right, going to CISOs? Well, here's the deal. And literally do this. Say you sell to CISOs in healthcare. Go on to Google, go on to ChatGPT, go on to Perplexity, and literally Google CISOs healthcare thought leaders 2024. Okay. Go find the 5 or 6 thought leaders in your space that who you ultimately want to sell to, like not those 5 people, right? But like you want to sell to CISOs in healthcare. So find the companies and the people who are sharing content around what it's like to be a CISO in healthcare. That's step 1. Step 2, get their blogs, right? And sign up for Feedly. So Feedly. And by the way, I have zero affiliation with them. So Feedly, it's an RSS aggregator, right? So say there's like 4 or 5 different sales blogs you like reading. Usually you have to go to 4 or 5 different sales websites or get those emails to hit your inbox. In Feedly, you can create a folder called sales blogs and dump all your sales blogs in there. Or what I would do is create a folder called CISO's Healthcare. And I would put those blogs into that folder. Then create a morning routine for yourself where instead of checking your fantasy leagues and for me getting all pissed off because I suck at fantasy or reading the morning news, which is horribly miserable these days, focus on learning, right? So now for 30 minutes a day, grab your coffee, open up that little folder and scan through a bunch of the headlines to see if there's anything that piques your interest about something that you're interested in learning about. And that's the key here. You have to be curious and you have to want to learn about this profession, okay? And not just this profession, your personas. So then what you do is you find articles that are educating you on your space and your persona. You consume that content with the main priority of learning, okay? Then, and only when you learn something, you take the extra 2 seconds, you share that article out on social with a little bit of context. Hey, really interesting article here by Chris, who's a CISO at, in healthcare about, talking about this. My key takeaways were X, Y, Z, right? What do you all think, right? Now, the secondary benefit of that obviously is, you get engagement, you start to build your brand. But even if you don't, even if nobody comments or shares or whatever it is, you've got your primary goal met. You've learned something, right? So now, as you do that, you're getting more and more ingrained in the industry. You have better talk tracks. You can, when a CISO in healthcare comes on the phone, you can say, hey, have you seen that? Did you see that article recently about so-and-so who just did this? Are you seeing the same things, right? That type of stuff. And if you get really good on social, you follow your top 25 CISOs that you want to, your tier 1 accounts. You create a sales navigator list for that or whatever it is. You see what they're posting. Maybe tag that one of them on your post because one of their posts is relevant to something you posted, right? Hey, Jim, I saw you posted the other day about this. Would love your thoughts on this, right? Then you see the engagement, right? And now, as you do that, first of all, your LinkedIn feed starts to fill up with stuff that's relevant to your industry. So if and when, by the way, you hit somebody with an email or make a phone call to a prospect and they happen to go be like, who is this kid? Before I respond to them and they look at your LinkedIn profile, like, oh my God, like this is actually isn't just a sales rep trying to sell some shit to me. Like this is a steward of the industry. Like this is a kid who's bringing some ideas to the table, right? Okay. And now you've like in 30 minutes a day, you've learned, you've educated, you've built your brands, you've done a little bit of process. You know what I mean? So now, and then when you talk about value, every once in a while, and if you want to take it to like the third level and really get good with this, what I do is, so say, Chris, say you're a CISO in healthcare, right? And I cold call you and I pick up and you pick up and we have a conversation. But a lot of conversations end with, you know what, John, sounds good. We just got too many other things going on right now. Why don't you follow back up with me about 6 months, right? Everybody gets that. Ask this very specific question. Chris, happy to call you back and, obviously try to deal with the objection. What's going to change in 6 months, whatever. But hey, Chris, how do I stay top of mind between now and then without being annoying? And look, Chris, the reason I ask, and you add this, the reason I ask is because I tend to follow a lot of the trends that are happening in the industry and a lot of the tools that are out there. So, I come across like any new tools or any new tech that's out there or somebody, whatever. Is there something specific that if I come across that you get some value out of, right? Because I don't want to just touch base and check in with you moving forward. And the last thing I want to do is call you in 6 months and get to have this same conversation and add no value to you. So is there anything that and by the way, that does not have to be JV sales specific. That's just, about what's going on here. And they might tell you, well, John, if you come across any new tools or tech I should be paying attention to, feel free to send that my way. Fantastic. Well, now you go find you go find that content. You create another folder in Feedly for that content, and then you find a way to track that interest. Like what I used to do with Salesforce, we made the switch to HubSpot, but I used to do in Salesforce. The contact field underneath, I would create a section called interests. And in that interest section, it was just checkboxes. Do they care about, tools, technology, this, that, and the other thing? And so after I'd get off the phone with you, I'd just check off those boxes. And then I'd follow that content. And then I'd consume that content. And I'd share that content. And then I'd run a quick little report in Salesforce that says, I want to see every VP of sales in the SaaS industry that fits my tier 1 characteristics who cared about that thing. And that might only be a list of 5 or 6 of them. And I sent a nice personalized email. Hey, Chris, I know we talked about 3 months ago where you were really interested in this. I came across this article, man. This thing is bananas about something. I thought you might find it interesting. There you go. And that's your touching base and checking in. And as the final tip on this, never touch base or check in, ever. They are the two most meaningless phrases in sales. It means there's absolutely no reason for me to for your call. So therefore, there is zero reason for me to talk to you. Have a reason. And it doesn't always have to be, I want to sell you something. I want to sell you something. Add value. That's how you can do it in a very authentic way and check off about 50 different boxes as far as prospecting, brand building, marketing, everything else.
Yeah. That's some great advice. I think we can leave it at that. I think that's a great way to end it. I think the key takeaway from my end, I mean, I think is one is like, I don't know how many of those that entered into sales from that hype period from 2010 to 2022 or what have you think like that,
Yep.
because they've been so used to a different way of doing things. But what you're saying is being authentically curious,
Mm-hmm.
and that authentic curiosity is what I think leads to confidence, which I think is the key differentiator from a junior salesperson to somebody who ends up becoming a lifer in the sales game.
Yep.
Because when you have confidence, you can hone in on those body language. You can
Yep.
hone in on how they're leaning in or not leaning into certain things. And I see that all the time, just people who misread the conversation, and you have their attention. And I think a lot of sales reps still don't understand this. Like when you have somebody on a video call or a phone call or whatever, like that is valuable time. And if you're not
Yep.
making the best use out of every second, every minute that you have their attention, and you're not keeping them engaged,
Yep.
and
The
that's your
point.
fault. It's your
What's the point?
fault. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the point?
Somebody told me this early in my career, and I stick with this in my head. It stuck with me. He had said, um, after every conversation he has with somebody, he wants to be able to ask the question, would you have paid for this?
Yeah.
And for them to think about it. And it's not that they would, but his whole concept is, did you get enough value out of this conversation that it was worth it? Right. That's ultimately what he's trying. So that's why I come with, one more quick little tip for everybody. Get your ICP, go find the other 5 or 6 vendors that touch your ICP, right? That are not yours, right? And go call up their best rep and say, hey, can you and I develop a relationship where once a week we talk about the deals we're working on? And I also want to be able to refer you into clients that if I find that need, I can help with, right? So now you become a resource. Now when you're diagnosing problems, and maybe you didn't find something that you could hit a home run in. And by the way, do this with your competitors too. Know what you are great at, and then know what your competitors are great at. And when you're not great at something, I know this sounds scary for a lot of young sales professionals. Don't fucking sell it. Give it to your competitor, because you're going to smash that square peg into that round hole, and you're going to get bad reviews. Client's going to be pissed, and it's going to do nothing but hurt you. But if you give what you're not great at, if you give it to one of your competitors, the client's going to love you. They'll remember that. The vendor that the competitor that you're giving it to is now not going to see you as a competitor. They're actually going to probably, reciprocate in some way, shape, or form. And you'll build a network that you can lean on far into the future. So there's another small little easy thing to do, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Great advice. I mean, I think too many people are so scared. I think from a founder perspective too, like or entrepreneurial perspective, so many people think like, I can't give away my idea, the IP, blah, 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 all that stuff, right?
Please.
And it's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about how you execute. It's what you do. It's the actions taken. And it's not,
Yeah.
every idea has been thought of 6 ways to Sunday anyways.
Your IP, my ass. Like I literally anytime somebody asks me to sign an NDA, I'm like, go
Yeah.
fuck off. Like, please, your idea isn't special. It's
Yeah.
not. I'm sorry. And engineers, I love you, but engineering founders, get your head out of your ass. Your product, I mean, as long as it's got the basic features, functions that everybody else does, yeah, and there's probably special components to it, but that's not selling. That's
Yeah.
on a spreadsheet with features and functions of, oh, yours does this. And guess what? If your features you have the best features right now today, especially with AI, tomorrow you won't. So you're going to keep chasing that thing. And it's about how you sell, not what you sell. And stop thinking that your shit is so good, because it's just not. I'm sorry. It's just not.
Absolutely. On that note, John, thank you so much for taking the time today. I think you left some great nuggets for our audience to take away from. Again, thanks for covering that for us.
Yeah, and just to throw it out there, if anybody's interested, I got a podcast too, the Make It Happen Monday podcast, and then jbarrows.com is where you can find all my stuff. I do training, I got free shit. Hit me up on LinkedIn, whatever you want to do.
Awesome. We'll share that too.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.